Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our webinar series. My name is Sierra Schuchard, and I am the Program Manager for America's Watershed Initiative. AWI is a nonprofit working across the Mississippi River watershed with two main goals. One is to build science and share data across the watershed, and the other is to collaborate throughout the watershed. So we have the Mississippi River Watershed Partnership to support that. And this webinar series is one of the projects in our building knowledge realm. We're so excited to have Randy Smith here today to talk to us a little bit about the work that he is doing. Randy Smith is the Illinois River Project Director for the Nature Conservancy, based at the Emiquon Preserve along the Illinois River. His work focuses on management of TNC's Emiquon and Spunky Bottoms Preserves, wetland ecology and management, working with a variety of partners to influence wetland habitat for plants, animals, fish, and people, and other big river and floodplain work. Randy has a BS and MS degrees from University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point and Southern Illinois University Carbondale, respectively. He's previously worked for the Illinois Department of Natural Resources as the state waterfowl biologist and for the Illinois Natural History Survey as a wetland and waterbird researcher, where he initiated wetland habitat and waterfowl monitoring at the onset of restoration for the Emiquon Preserve. If you have any questions for Randy during his presentation, you can put those in the Q&A box, and we will get to those after his presentation. So I'll hand it over to Randy, and thank you again.
All right. Thank you, Sierra. Thanks everyone for joining today. Really excited to be able to share our work with you. The Illinois is a river that's really important to me. I've been working on it for quite a while now, since my master's work was focused around the confluence, and really have kind of stayed along the river since then. So that I'm just going to kind of dive right in. So TNC's had an Illinois River program for quite a while, and our primary focus is on our two big preserves, but also on the rest of the river as a whole. So for those not as familiar with the Illinois, it drains about a third of the state of Illinois, and it flows west out of Chicagoland to where it makes a big bend and then heads southwest through the kind of the middle of the state and then joins the Mississippi just above St. Louis. Emiquon and Spunky Bottoms are two main preserves along the river, are kind of at the midpoint. So Spunky's just below the LaGrange Lock and Dam, so actually in the Alton Pool of the Mississippi River is where the water is controlled. And then Emiquon's midway between the LaGrange and Peoria Lock and Dams. And those things kind of create some different scenarios for how water moves through the river past those sites and kind of creates some challenges or some opportunities depending on how you look at it. Emiquon's about 6,700 acres. About 5,000 of that is in the floodplain. Spunky's about 1,200 acres. About 1,000 of that is in the floodplain. Both sites are drainage and levee districts, so they were disconnected from the Illinois River by earthen levees in the 1920s. And I think we'll move on from there. So why the Illinois River? We've got this huge river system, the Mississippi. We've got all these big Midwestern rivers. Why focus on the Illinois out of all of these? There's some really interesting, unique things about the Illinois, and I'm going to try to blow through those in just a couple of minutes, really quick. So the first thing is kind of the geologic history, which is kind of a crazy place to start, but this river is pretty unique in that it is the historic path of the Mississippi River, where the last glaciation pushed the Mississippi west to its current route, stranding a much smaller stream within a really large floodplain, which creates some really unique kind of opportunities and a large floodplain with a lot of diversity and a lot of opportunity. The river has historically had just an incredible abundance of fish and wildlife and things associated with it. including people. Archaeologists tell us that people have occupied the Illinois River Valley and this place, Emiquon, specifically for as many as 600 generations, which is pretty crazy to think about, and that's likely because of those very abundant resources. So the Illinois at one point was the most productive commercial mussel stream, freshwater mussel stream in North America. It was the most productive commercial inland fishery in North America and was incredibly important for the commercial waterfowl hunting trade when that was legal. Some major changes that have taken place that have really impacted the river. So the first one is the Chicago River. So for one, it's really odd having a major urban center in the headwaters of a river. So this is a pretty unique thing, and it didn't used to be that way. So the Chicago River used to flow into Lake Michigan, around 1900, with a burgeoning population and industrial scene in Chicago, all of their various forms of waste were flowing into the Chicago and Calumet rivers and into Lake Michigan, where they were also getting their drinking water from. That was a serious problem for that local human population. So, an engineering marvel at the time was to reverse the flow of the Chicago River, connect it with some channels to kind of the headwaters of the Illinois, and then be able to flush all of those things with Lake Michigan water downstream. That permanently raised the level of the Illinois River, as well as all of those various nasty things moving downstream, essentially killed the river as far south as Peoria. So, really a good step for Chicago, not a good step for the rest of the river. The next kind of major change is that floodplain. So talking about that really large floodplain associated with the historic Mississippi. So on the left is the extent of that floodplain, and on the right is how much of that floodplain has been disconnected from the river behind levees, primarily for agriculture. Disconnecting a river from its floodplain just changes in a number of drastic ways, and most of the river here is disconnected. This is a navigable river, so there are lock and dams, and that, of course, changes the whole nature of a river too, how the water flows through it. So this series of lock and dams, the kind of that top image, you can kind of see how the river stair steps because of the different lock and dam pools, and really has two very unique characteristics. So kind of that flatter pool where it's associated with the historic Mississippi Channel, and then a much steeper kind of younger river from after it makes that big bend and heads towards Chicago. And then finally, just the landscape in Illinois. The watershed historically was of prairies and woodlands, and that now is largely agriculture and urban. And that, of course, changes how water moves on the landscape and across the landscape, and all of those things. Any number of threats associated with the Illinois River, much like any of our other big rivers, sediment, invasive species, nutrients, and all of the things that go along with those. They are common. They are very prevalent in the Illinois as well. So what has that done to the river? So two hydrographs here, the top one being historic before most of those large scale changes took place. The bottom being more recent. And so the top, you can kind of see that this was really a very traditional kind of spring flood pulse driven system. So, spring snow melt and runoff, followed by a summer low water period. The species that use the river valley really evolved with that. So whether that's bottomland hardwoods, or spring migrating waterfowl taking advantage of food resources available from flooding, the whole system worked really well together. As we fast forward to when those large scale changes have kind of taken place, we see that we now get flooding at any time of the year, at any magnitude, and for any duration. The only thing that's really still consistent about our flooding regime now is its inconsistency. And this has caused pretty substantial degradation to the system. So just one kind of test case here, and this is not an outlier. This is very much how the system has behaved kind of throughout. There's still a tremendous number of backwater wetlands, floodplain wetlands associated with the Illinois River. This is just one example. So a mapping project that was done by the Illinois Natural History Survey in the early 2000s So folks there stumbled on some hand-drawn maps from a gentleman named Frank Belrose that were done in the 1950s. We're able to digitize those and come up with some acreages for different habitat types, and just to see how habitats were interspersed and very diverse and really just really high quality wetlands in the 50s and how they transitioned through time. So went back, revisited these wetlands in the 2000s and mapped them. And what we see more or less across the board is this transition to open water, very shallow, very loose flocculent bottoms that are not able to support rooted macrophytes, essentially glorified large mud puddles. This lake is just a couple miles downstream from Emiquon. It's a DNR state fish and wildlife area. It is bottomless mud. There's very little plant growth growing in it. There's just not much there. And again, this is not an outlier. This is really what most lakes have transitioned to across the system that have really any form of regular connection with the river because of all of those large scale changes. So, kind of looking at the area of Emiquon, so this is the central Illinois River Valley, kind of before a lot of those changes took place. So, before the levees, after conversion of Lake Michigan water through the Chicago River, and so the central Illinois was just this incredibly high quality, diverse area. And then the lakes that made up Emiquon were Thompson Lake and Flag Lake were really kind of considered like the jewel of the central Illinois River, really kind of the best of the best. So lots of wetlands in that area, and these were some of the best wetlands of that area. The green outline is the Nature Conservancy's land holdings here at Emiquon. And then with conversion, just about anything that could be drained was. So most of those wetlands are gone or consolidated. Lake Chautauqua, that's kind of there prominently, that's a failed drainage and levee district. So they tried to drain it and farm it. There was too much spring flow to keep it dry enough for farming, and so it stayed wet, and it's now Chautauqua National Wildlife Refuge. So, and most of these are still intact and still functioning. It was just kind of wholesale conversion from bluff to bluff, more or less. What that looked like in reality, this is Emiquon, pre-restoration. So, this was the largest contiguous farm in Illinois, all one landowner, which was critical for success of the restoration. There was, over 5,000 acres of cropland, a couple thousand head cattle feedlot. This was kind of industrial farming at a top scale. And our biggest restoration action was really kind of turning off the pumps that kept the site dry for 80 years. Water came back. It just helped that we had 3 of the 10 wettest years on record as we were trying to get water back on the site. And kind of in that bottom picture, you can kind of see those 2 lake basins. You can kind of see that point that kind of comes down from the top of the picture, and that's more prominent. Those 2 lake basins become more prominent at lower water levels. Sometimes they're underwater more. Sometimes they're a little more prominent. This is kind of a mid-water level shot, I guess. And this area that is kind of in the big picture there, that's our public use area. So it's open 365 days a year during all daylight hours. And that was kind of a departure from a lot of Nature Conservancy properties. We were hoping to get people on the property and to value it. The restoration work at Emiquon was never just about restoring Emiquon and it being one site and kind of a standalone site, though. It's always been about the Illinois River, and you can't start to make progress on the river if you don't allow the river and the floodplain to interact. So this was pretty controversial to put a water control structure through the levee to reestablish some connection. And to be perfectly honest, I was on the side of don't do it. I was working on that mapping project, spending a lot of time in other Illinois River Valley wetlands, and they were all degraded. If they had any form of connection with the river, they were typically a very poor quality. So I couldn't understand why you would want to degrade Emiquon to that level when it was such a resounding success. What was lost in translation there was that this allows a managed connection. It allows the folks working at the site, the Nature Conservancy, to make decisions on when that connection occurs, how that connection occurs, which way the water is moving, and so still having that exchange of species and nutrients and all of those things between the river and its floodplain, but under a controlled scenario rather than just taking on all of those ills associated with the Illinois River yet. So this water control structure, I guess, with a little more detail, kind of world class, one of a kind, two large square culverts that not only increase capacity but also allow an excellent opportunity for experimentation in terms of like having a treatment and control simultaneously. This also has pumps, so we can move water out if we have to. That have a high capacity, and then kind of the both the inside and outside of the structure are fitted with what we call sampling structures that have a series of stop log slots. So we can put stop logs, we can put nets, we can put screens in those things, and do all sorts of different testing and sampling and experimentation. So, like for instance, would be if you're familiar with the Brandon Road Lock and Dam project to keep Asian carp out of the Great Lakes. Some of those technologies that are going to be incorporated in that were tested at this water control structure. This is our hydrograph through time. So on the left is back around the start of restoration. So the green line is just our water level. So we started with a large drawdown to try to kill out any of the common carp that were living in the drainage ditches when restoration started. And then looking at that graph through time, yellow is where we are pumping water out, blue is where we are flowing water out, and red is where we are flowing water in. So just talked a lot about how important that connection between the river and its floodplain is. And then you see that we spend very little time connecting the river and the floodplain. The river is still really messed up. There's a lot of bad things in it, and Emiquon's really big, and there's a pretty significant expense to managing the place. So if the site becomes kind of too unwieldy, too messed up with some of those things associated with the river, it's a really heavy lift in order to kind of get it back. So we're really cautious about making that connection. But along with that, we do an awful lot of science and monitoring. We have a series of what we call our key ecological attributes that range from everything from water quality to fish to ducks to pretty much you name it. Some of that is mapping habitat assemblages. So this is really similar to that Illinois River wide project that the History Survey did, and we actually contract with the History Survey for that work. And so the point is not to look at specific habitat assemblages, but just kind of how things change through time. And although we can't replicate historic conditions really in 1 year, just because that's a lot of water to move and a pretty major expense, we can try to replicate them through time. So we go through periods of dry, periods of high water, and kind of try to hit all of these different points that would have been important historically, over a series of years if we can't do it in a single year. And a lot of other things that go along with that. So we use prescribed fire. We of course use herbicide and monitor a lot of different things and plant trees and all of the other great things associated with a large wetland site. So our other site that I really haven't had an opportunity to talk about at all yet is our Spunky Bottoms site. So this is about 40 miles downstream from Emiquon. There in the picture, Illinois River's on the right, Spunky's kind of in the middle and on the left. So we actually bought this property and started that restoration prior to Emiquon. It's a little bit less known. It's much more rural. It's in Brown County, Illinois. It's hard to get to. There's a major highway going past Emiquon. There is almost no road going past Spunky. There's just a little township road. Again, it's a drainage and levee district, disconnected from the river by a levee, and was intensively farmed prior to the Nature Conservancy taking it over. And that restoration again largely revolved around turning off those agricultural pumps. The restoration was going spectacularly. It was a really high quality site, lots of threatened and endangered species, plants, animals, and fish. was just going really, really well. Maybe a little bit of succession going on. We did not have a connection to the Illinois River there. We only had the old agricultural pumps that allowed us to get rid of some water when we had too much, but that was really our only water management tool. In 2013, we had the flood of record along the Illinois River, and that blew out the levee surrounding Spunky, just in one spot, about a 120-foot gap there. And this was on a flanking levee along a tributary, so it wasn't at a low spot. And so the flood water then actually became impounded inside Spunky, flooding a couple of roadways, which was a mess. We were sued over it. And so we actually had to punch a hole in the levee at a low spot and allowing that water to drain back out into the Illinois River. So now we are fully connected. So this was in 2013, and until recently, that connection persisted. So with every up and down in the river, the water levels inside Spunky would rise and fall. And again, they don't behave how we would want them to traditionally. We are rarely wet when we want to be, and we are rarely dry when it makes sense to be. So kind of the cool thing about this was that we continued our monitoring through that whole period of time. So we had monitoring going on prior to the levee blowout, and that continued through this whole period of time. So this is just a shot, kind of shows how that blowout progressed. So still a blowout in 2023, and you can kind of see the cross section of the levee there hiding in the brush. But that monitoring work that went on, that really kind of drove home that a unmanaged connection to the river is detrimental in this part of the world. We really very quickly and very completely lost nearly all of those threatened and endangered species, lost all of that great habitat diversity that was associated with that, and it very quickly degraded to kind of that very poor quality wetland that we might see at a lot of these other connected, unmanageable or unmanaged connection type sites. Um, so here you can kind of see, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but on the far right of the screen, you can kind of see that hole in the levee, Illinois River going by there in the background. But the plan is in place to fix that. We're going to build a water control structure that is very kind of a replica of the structure at Emiquon, but sized appropriately and maybe not with quite all the bells and whistles. Emiquon, we kind of was a spare no expense. Let's kind of try everything. And Spunky is a little bit more of just the things we need. Still pretty big, still pretty impressive, but a little more cost effective, and kind of just what we need instead of all the things we wanted to try and experiment with. Still a sampling structure, kind of on the inside of the wetland and a screw gate, and stop logs, and we can still run nets. And this is sized identically to the sampling structure at Emiquon, so we can use gears between both sites. So we're getting really close. This is almost completed. We're really excited. We're hoping to be able to start flowing water in relatively soon. And we have really high hopes that this is going to be incredibly successful. Just during construction this past year, a cofferdam impounded water in the site a little bit. So this was just runoff that collected in the site. And we just saw a tremendous response from the plant communities, and wildlife responded really well too. Not really fish, just because this was from runoff. So not really a fisheries component to it. But a lot of wetland birds, a lot of TNEs, TNE plants as well. It was great. We're pretty excited about it. So a question might be why both sites? Why do we need this really big Emiquon, and why do we need kind of another smaller site nearby? So the size is a big one, and just kind of the nimbleness of being able to manage. And really we want these as demonstration sites. We want to be able to take managers and show them some good things, some bad things, maybe how to deal with some things that they might be having challenges on their sites. And when they come to Emiquon, that 5,000 acres of floodplain land it can be overwhelming. A lot of folks really struggle to wrap their heads around how this massive site is applicable to their site at all. Spunky's a little bit more reasonable, though. It's a little bit more relatable. It's maybe more similar in size to something they have, and just the way the site is kind of broken up, it just seems it might be a little closer, feel a little closer to home. O&M costs. uh, gravity flow that we can do at Spunky. I guess that's an important point is that its location located near the lock and dam allows the river level to drop really, really low in most years. And so we don't have pumps at Spunky. We think we can manage the site solely with gravity, which makes O&M costs a lot cheaper, and we're able to move water around a lot more. Just that smaller site, that more remoteness. We've got 60,000 visitors a year at Emiquon. We don't anticipate having anywhere near that at Spunky. It's just going to allow us to be a lot more agile and to really experiment with water movement and connection to the river, and really kind of learn where the tipping points are, of having more of that important connection, but without really detrimental things that are gonna damage the site and damage our overall habitat quality. And if they do damage those things, we can kind of push the reset button at Spunky a lot more easily with that gravity drainage rather than having to pump the water out, and not have all of the PR nightmare and things like that that might be associated with Emiquon. And then of course take those lessons learned at Spunky and apply them to Emiquon so that we can be connected more regularly there as well. So, like any conservation organization, we have these big, lofty goals. This is for our five-state Midwest division. The point is not to try to memorize these or even make a point of these. It's just kind of to show that that's kind of the direction we're working in. And we fall under this kind of larger umbrella of these bigger, loftier ideas. These we've stepped down to kind of these strategic approaches for our Illinois River program. And the takeaway here is really kind of using Emiquon and Spunky as these demonstration sites that we can reach out to other managers, bring them on, show them the things that work, show them the things that don't work, and really kind of help folks understand how we can increase the ecological capacity of the whole system. Maybe pie in the sky, but that's kind of where we're headed. So how do we do something like that? So the river, the Illinois River. So this again is the kind of the central Illinois River. Emiquon and Spunky are in green. The black bars are the Peoria Lock and Dam and the LaGrange Lock and Dam. A tremendous number of drainage and levee districts in our part of the world. About 300,000 acres in drainage and levee districts within the Illinois River. I'm not necessarily advocating that we go and buy more drainage and levee districts. That's not really financially viable. Emiquon in today's dollars would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $60 million. So you run out of conservation funding pretty quickly. But there might be some things that we can do there with drainage, water management, or some other things that would be beneficial to the river as a whole. And then the other part of that is just this is the number of existing backwater wetlands in that same stretch of river. It's a pretty tremendous number. Most of them are degraded. A few of them are really high quality, but there is capacity to increase the ecological value, the habitat quality of most of these sites. I don't have any delusions that we're going to take Anderson Lake and turn it back into 1955 Anderson Lake, but we might be able to get some pieces of that back through some careful management actions and such. So our goal here is a lofty goal of impacting nearly 60,000 acres in the Illinois River. That gives me a little bit of heartburn, but is also a pretty fun challenge to try to tackle, and is probably going to be many kind of small changes to medium changes replicated many times throughout the system through working with a variety of partners and landowners and things like that. And so that's kind of where we're going and what we hope to do with our sites. And I think that's all I've got as far as presentation, and maybe there's some questions.
Thank you, Randy. Yeah, there's a few questions for you. So we'll just take a few minutes to go through some of these. What types of negative ecological effects did you see when you had the levee breach at Spunky?
Yeah, so one is just hydrology. So that's probably the biggest one. So all of that kind of unseasonal flooding that was associated with that really kind of jumpy hydrograph that was at the bottom of that one slide. So water is in, water is out. We rarely had a water level that was appropriate for the type of species communities we were hoping to support. So let's just take I'm a waterfowl biologist by trade. Let's take waterfowl for instance. So, we oftentimes were flooded during the summer growing season, so we didn't develop good plant communities, and then we were oftentimes dry during fall and spring when the majority of migratory waterfowl would be in the area. The other side of that is fisheries communities. We lost a really good fishery at that location that was really diverse and really high quality. We also had some TNE plant species there, and just that flooding that was not kind of consistent with those historic um, with the way floods would move historically and timing and things like that did not support those plants. So those were lost as well.
Great. I'll do one more question since we're kind of closing in on our time, and then we'll take any other questions that you all have and give them to Randy and give them back out to you guys in written format. So our last question is, what is being monitored at both Emiquon and Bottoms?
Yeah. So I mentioned those key ecological attributes, and so again, those range from things like water quality. So different components of that. So from water chemistry to water clarity, to dissolved oxygen and things like that. We've got migratory waterfowl and other water birds are monitored. Breeding water birds are monitored. Fish, larval fish, overwintering fish, sediment firmness, plant communities, invasive species, pretty much you name it. I mean, we have a whole KEA document that kind of walks through all those things, and we monitor as many of those things as we can in each year. Um, some of them are kind of umbrellas for other things, and some of them are just not, for cost reasons or whatever, we don't monitor them. But as many of them as we can, and we try to use, we have ranges established for all of those things, kind of, excellent, good, poor, whatever. And that's kind of our grading system. And a lot of that kind of helps point our management decisions. We try to manage adaptively based on where we're at with those KEAs, and let those kind of lead us where we need to go next.
Great. Thank you so much, Randy. This was a wonderful presentation, and personally, I learned a lot, and I think others did as well. So I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, happy to do it. Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for attending. We'll get back to you with a recording and answers to some of your questions.